whichever you are comfortable with, whichever you find good, the language is okay, whichever is more appropriate with the examples. For that reason, I have selected 3 books and given you the soft copies. Giving you soft copies here only, you can take it from there. So, good morning. I am Ramanuj Ganguly. I am doing a class on case study research in this workshop by I start. Okay. So I have divided my lecture in 3 parts. That is, I will be dealing with the 3 issues that we researchers confront. As the first is how to ask the questions. The questions about the subject, about the issue that we are dealing with for research. So it's basically not the questions we are talking about the research questions. How to frame the research questions, even if we have an issue in our mind, even if we have selected a subject upon which we are going to work. What becomes important is how are we going to ask the question in a way which are not biased by our own thoughts or not biased by our own customary habits. So for that reason, I have first section of my lecture would be on how to ask the research questions. So asking research question is my first section. And then the second section would be understanding case study research. So here in the second section, I will be dealing with case study specific. What case study is all about, why case study is called a case study, what is a case, and why it is significant for a researcher to undertake case study. And finally, I will be talking about the third section, where I will be dealing with the doing of the case study or doing the work. How does one do? How does one do a case study? So, since this workshop is on qualitative research, I'm sure by now you all are introduced with what qualitative research is all about and how it is qualitatively different from quantitative research. So, assuming that I will be talking, I will just like to know the background of my participants so that it's easier for us to discuss. Because if I come and deliver a monologue, then what happens is most of the things does not register. So I would prefer a situation where please discuss your problems, your research problems, so that we can sort of get hold of the feeling of the problem, and then we can proceed from there so that we can have something concrete, something substantive from the discussion where we all participate and we find a way out, because there is nothing fixed, nothing that can be so the issue that we would be doing is that please discuss about your own research problem so that we can have something out of this. So may I get introduced about your background and the kind of problem that you all are dealing with, the research issues that you are dealing with. Sir, if you can start.
My name is Akhil. I work with an educational organization and I am just initiating in the field of research. And my background, I have done MA in education from Tata Institute of Social Sciences.
Okay. And you are teaching in a school or a college?
I am working in an organization which is basically works with government schools in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh.
Okay.
So I'm leading a team of content development,
Acha.
and I work with textbook development, teachers training.
Okay. And what kind of research that you are planning to undertake?
Actually, my organization is going to start a research section from next year. So they are just sending their employee to get exposed to the research.
The research section means which we will be doing?
I will be doing research in development of textbook and their concepts. There are different methods of teaching. So they might be teaching, they might be trying to find out which techniques will be preferably used in different disciplines.
Okay, okay. That is the kind of problem that you have with regard to research.
There are so many, but this is the one from
one area.
My concern.
Please, thank you.
So my name is Prof. I am doing my PhD in social work from Social Work Department of Mishore.
Okay, okay. So what's your area of research?
So my area is experiences of social inclusion among mental health service users with intellectual disability.
Okay.
So I will be using kind of phenomenological approach or methods. I am thinking how case study is related to phenomenology, whether I can use case study or which version, like there is Robert In's tradition, so which one I can use with that one, or should I use, or can I do triangulation later onwards, I don't know, of the findings.
Okay, okay. So this is what is your area of concern. Okay. Next.
I'm Shana, research scholar of Aligarh Muslim University.
Which university?
Aligarh Muslim University. And my research topic is influence of political power on the evolution of modern contemporary Indian art. And
modern contemporary?
Indian art.
Indian art.
Yeah, I'm from fine arts background.
You are from fine arts background and you are doing impact of politics?
Political power on modern contemporary Indian art.
Political power on modern contemporary Indian art. Okay. And your background is finance.
Fine.
Okay. How do you propose to do your work? How do you plan to see? How do you propose to do your work? What's your plan of work? How are you going to check out what you are trying to?
I'm trying to check out that how the contemporary artists react to the modern contemporary political situation, social problem, and they are why they are act like and more like activists than artists.
Okay, you?
Yes, good morning, sir. I am Shushmita Kaldar from West Bengal National University of Theoretical Sciences. I am doing my LLM here in West Bengal National University of Theoretical Sciences. And my specialization is on international law and intellectual property rights. Especially, I am focusing on the copyright aspect in my LLM dissertation. And the topic of my research is the intellectual property rights of Indian film directors and assessment and evaluation of the Copyright Act, Indian Copyright Act.
Indian filmmakers.
Indian film directors.
Indian film directors. Do they have a copyright?
No, actually they don't have any copyright. But copyright is always with the, in Indian perspective, copyright is always with the producer. But in 2010, there was one proposal to give joint ownership of copyright to both the producer and the director.
Okay.
And against that bill, there was huge protest from the point of from the part of the producers, and that's why the total film industry was almost going to be collapsed. Or the process of filmmaking was almost going to be declined, and that's why ultimately the bill was, when the proposal was dropped. And but the scholars claim that directors also should be granted any form of intellectual property rights, not the copyright itself, but it may be the sui generis, in kind of sui generis right, like neighboring rights or anything. So my focus is on that aspect. But basically, I'm aim to participate in this workshop is basically for my PhD research, where I want to shift from international law and intellectual property rights to constitutional law or criminal law.
Okay.
আমি সুরজিৎ দেববর্মা সঙ্গীত ভবন থেকে রিসার্চ করছি।
আচ্ছা, কি নিয়ে?
আমার হচ্ছে স্যার ডান্সের উপর, আমি ডান্স ফ্যাকাল্টি থেকে বিলং করি। তো আমার ফিল্ডটা হচ্ছে অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমি ত্রিপুরা, তো ত্রিপুরা ওখানকার ট্রাইবাল যে ডান্সগুলো আছে ওখানকার সোসাইটি এবং কালচারে কিভাবে সেটা প্রভাব ওটার আছে সেটা নিয়ে আমি করছি।
সেটা নিয়ে কাজ করছো?
হ্যাঁ।
তুমি ওয়ার্কশপ থেকে কি এক্সপেক্ট করছো যে এই ওয়ার্কশপ থেকে শিখবে?
স্যার অ্যাকচুয়ালি আমাদের যে পারফর্মিং আর্টসটা, তো এটা মানে ওইটার ফিল্ড তো অন্যরকম, তো সেই অনুযায়ী ওয়ার্কশপটা করে কতটুকু আমি মানে আমার কাজে আমি করতে পারবো, মানে গ্রহণ করে সেটাকে করতে পারবো, সেজন্যই আমার ওয়ার্কশপটা করে।
নবেন্দু মল্লিক, দ্য ইউনিভার্সিটি অফ বর্ধমান থেকে, হিস্ট্রি ডিপার্টমেন্ট।
আচ্ছা,
আমি এখন রিসার্চ শুরু করব।
রিসার্চ শুরু করবে? কি নিয়ে ভাবনা চিন্তা ভালো লাগে?
আমি আমাদের ফিল্ম লাইনই ভাবছি, 70-এর দশকের বেঙ্গলি ফিল্ম কিভাবে ওয়েস্ট বেঙ্গলের সোশ্যাল অ্যান্ড কালচার বা ইকোনমিক ক্ষেত্রে তার প্রভাব ফেলছে এবং কিভাবে তার চেঞ্জ আনছে তখন তার স্ট্রাকচার, বিশেষ করে আনএমপ্লয়মেন্টের ক্ষেত্রে, সেটা নিয়ে ভাবনা চিন্তা করছি।
মানে ফিল্ম আনএমপ্লয়মেন্টের ক্ষেত্রে চেঞ্জ আনছে?
হ্যাঁ,
কি বলবে?
মানে ধরুন ইন্টারভিউ একটা চলচ্চিত্র আছে যেখানে মৃণাল সেন ইন্টারভিউ চলচ্চিত্রে, সেখানে দেখা যাচ্ছে যে আমাদের
না, বুঝতে পেরেছি, তোমার উদাহরণ দিতে হবে না, মানে আমি জিজ্ঞেস করলাম যে তোমার প্রশ্নটা হচ্ছে যে ফিল্ম কি করে চেঞ্জ আনছে সোসাইটিতে, এইটা তো তোমার মূল প্রতিপাদ্য জায়গা।
প্রথমে ফিল্মে কিভাবে দেখানো হচ্ছে এবং তারপর ধীরে ধীরে কিভাবে সমাজে চেঞ্জ আসছে
ফিল্মের জন্য।
হ্যাঁ,
আচ্ছা, ওকে।
আমি কলকাতা থেকে, আমি তেজপুর ইউনিভার্সিটিতে এডুকেশন ডিপার্টমেন্টে পিএইচডি করেছি। আমার টপিক হচ্ছে স্টেটাস অফ ইমোশনাল ইন্টেলিজেন্স আর সোশ্যাল ইন্টেলিজেন্স অন টিচিং স্টাইল অ্যান্ড দেয়ার ইম্প্যাক্ট অন টিচিং স্টাইল অ্যান্ড
সোশ্যাল ইন্টেলিজেন্স, ইমোশনাল ইন্টেলিজেন্স,
এবার এদের ইম্প্যাক্টটা টিচিং স্টাইলের উপর আর প্রফেশনালিজম, মানে টিচার প্রফেশনালিজমের উপর যেরকম এফেক্ট আছে। টার্গেট গ্রুপটা হচ্ছে সেকেন্ডারি স্কুল টিচার, মানে এই টিচারদের উপরে দেখবো মানে বিভিন্ন ধরনের ইনস্টিটিউশন, মানে স্কুলকে সিলেক্ট করবো, গভর্নমেন্ট স্কুল, প্রাইভেট স্কুল, আর মানে যেগুলো এমনি মানে গভর্নমেন্ট এডেড স্কুল মানে কিছু, তো এই ধরনের স্কুল তিনটে ভাগে ভাগ করে নিয়ে সেখানকার টিচারদেরকে নিয়ে সেই টিচারদের কোনো টিচিং স্টাইলের পার্থক্য আছে কিনা এবং তার সঙ্গে কতটা ইমোশনাল ইন্টেলিজেন্স বা সোশ্যাল ইন্টেলিজেন্সের কম্পোনেন্ট ওয়াইজ তাদের কীরকম টিচিং স্টাইল বা প্রফেশনালিজমের কীরকম ভ্যারি করছে সেই জিনিসটা নিয়ে।
আমি রাজকুমার পাল, তেজপুর ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে পিএইচডি করছি এডুকেশন। আমার এরিয়া হচ্ছে স্কুল এডুকেশন। টপিক হলো টিচার্স অ্যাকাউন্টেবিলিটি অ্যান্ড স্টুডেন্ট এনগেজমেন্ট, স্ট্যাটাস অ্যান্ড ইম্প্যাক্ট অন একাডেমিক অ্যাচিভমেন্ট অফ সেকেন্ডারি স্কুল স্টুডেন্টস।
টিচার্স
অ্যাকাউন্টেবিলিটি
and student engagement. Okay.
শুভ সকাল, আমি লুৎফুল হক, বাঁকুড়া ইউনিভার্সিটি ফ্যাকাল্টি এডুকেশন ডিপার্টমেন্ট। I'm doing my PhD. The title is The Perspective of Context, Content and Process of Professional Development of Secondary School Teachers. The perspective of context, content and process of professional development of secondary school teachers.
Achha. Context, content and
Process.
Okay. Why I asked these questions, or why I was trying to gauge the kind of issues that are involved or the concerns that are there, because I always, as a student, I always felt that why should I study and why should I listen to a lecture and what purpose would it serve? Just ritually sitting in a classroom and doing a class and listening to a person, you may tangentially gather some information which may not be actually processed for meaningful results, outcomes. So I always ask these questions, so I always think that my audience would also like to ask the same question with regard to my class. So with that thing in mind, that as to how, like say for example, very important 3 words that he used: content, context and process. She used a word called emotional intelligence and social intelligence. Like he used the word impact of tribal dances, dance forms on the society, on the tribal structure, or like the contemporary scenarios where he's talking of content analysis, she's talking of IPR, and she's talking of from a historical perspective. He's talking of the movies having impact or changing the processes. And yours was, I'm missing it?
Yeah. Experiences of social inclusion among persons with intellectual disability.
Intellectual disability. Now, one thing very common, if you mark, how do you measure? The biggest challenge that you are going to face, you just joined us. What's your name?
So my name is Chalantika Chakraborty.
Huh?
Chalantika Chakraborty.
Okay, and your background, research?
I'm from the Department of Economics and not yet into research, but I want to get into.
You are from the Department of Economics where?
Cotton University, Assam.
Cotton University, Assam.
Yeah.
Okay. Cotton, it was a college, then
It was a college, then it was a state university, and now it's a university.
It's a central university? No.
No.
Okay. So, your area, you have not decided where?
That's what I'm trying to decide. It's
Any field of
environmental
interest?
economics, but I need a more specified area. I have just selected that environmental economics is the area.
What economics?
Environmental economics.
Environmental economics. Okay. What kind of environment will you be talking about?
Especially the cost-benefit analysis of the any kind of project relating to environment, policy, and something like carbon emissions, particularly those.
Okay. Now, see, what I was trying to tell you is that the basic issue that you will first confront is that I'm not specifically speaking case study right now. I'm just trying to warm up the area of research that all of us are going to discuss, because we have a practical concern. These methodology courseworks should not be like theoretical coursework, they should be dealing with the practical concerns of the participants. So keeping that in mind, that's my agenda, as to engage with the problems, individual problems that the participants have. With that agenda in mind, I have a one-line observation that how do you measure? The basic issue, how do you measure? And that measuring part, you have to think. Once you have targeted something, once you want to know something, that's why I have completely divergent from all, common to all theme for my first part of my lecture is asking research questions. That is why I have kept this, because in the question itself, please remember, in the question itself, your answer is embedded. If you do not ask the right question, if you do not put the question in a fashion, in a way, with the appropriate use of concepts and words, what happens? You get a garbled answer. Garbling of sound happens on your mobile, right? So even in society you get garbled response. You cannot draw response without, like say for example, she was talking about IPR, suppose. Now, with regard to IPR, as the first question that I asked her was, do the directors at all have IPR? Do they have the rights? That was the first question that I asked. I am not a person of that field, and I do not study movie making, and I am not a student of IPR as well. But the general knowledge that I have about both these fields made me ask that question, do they have it? But the moment I am asking this question, you should also think that I am a layperson. I am a common man, common person of the society. So like me, many will ask you. And your research should answer to laypersons like us, right? So if that is the motive, the issue that revolves, or the issue that you have to take into account is that this is a field where controversy is there. One must have it or not. That's a question. Now there is an intellectual investment on the part of the director in the making of a movie, where the director is actually imagining certain things from a text and trying to give it a shape. So same story, same content can have different meaning just by the way it is projected or presented. A very simple example is that when we eat at our home, we eat on the roadside dhaba, we eat in a 5-star hotel. The payment that is made, I remember when I was just had passed my masters, done my masters, and after that had gone to somebody had invited for a small party in the 5-star hotel, and I remember I was served salad. The way I was served the salad, I didn't eat it because I don't like the taste, but at the same time the way it was served, the way it was displayed, it was lovely. The point is, in a 5-star hotel, they can afford to serve you a salad like that. But suppose the same salad was served to me in a dhaba, and the dhaba would ask me that price of a 5-star hotel, I would not pay. Right? And if I ask my mom to do the same, or my wife to do the same, or myself, if I start doing it myself at home, that would not be easy, it will be cumbersome. Right? I can do it one day, I can do it 2 days, but not regularly. But they are doing it regularly for every customer, depending upon the order. Right? So the display part is a very important aspect. So how you are visualizing the thing, and that is where the intellect comes of the director, and that becomes an issue. Now, how she can go about it, how to measure it, and why case study can become useful. Please remind me, in this later half of the lecture we will discuss this. I just posed you the question, and I am just trying to give you an idea as to how to think about it. Because measuring is a very important aspect of your own work. Unless you can measure, unless you can set your agenda straight. So for that you need to ask the right question. So in the first slide, any doubts, any questions, whenever later on if you have, please write down my email ID, it's there. So you can always contact me, mail me your issue, I can always reply you back. So on the surface of it, it may seem simple to ask a question. And it is simple, it's not that difficult. But we must be ready to remember that asking a question and asking a research question are two different things. They are not all are the same. And why? If we are not asking discipline-specific question, or we are not looking for a question which is tuned to the area, to the concepts of the discipline you are in, you will not be able to get answer which are meaningful. Why I am saying? Non-specific explanations are all too common in our society. Like the way I am talking of intellectual property rights, or say mentally challenged, the way I would speak, because it's not my discipline, it will be a common non-specific explanation, causal, because I'm not a person who doesn't think logically, I think logically. So as a common human being, I think logically, try to rationalize, but I am not competent or trained or informed about the concepts. Because there are specific concepts which are discipline specific, related to a particular discipline. I belong to the discipline of, say, sociology. So when I am dealing with sociology, for me, the concepts of economics and education would not be that common, right? So when it is not common, so my explanations would be generally non-specific. So non-specific explanations are why they are problematic. Because the moment I am not knowing, I am a lay person, what happens? The explanation invariably lands where it should not be, or the logic or the context that we use become different. So I have used an example from sociology. That is when I am talking about, say, domestic violence. So in the domestic violence, the first question that we normally hear in a discussion, why did that woman agree to get abused? Why didn't she leave? And such way, the questions become that why did she stay in a relationship that was abusive? What is happening? The questions are itself blaming the individual. The individual in question is getting blamed. Actually, it is the structural situation where the husband can abuse. So it is societally processed. So the way, that's why I said the three words that he used, content, context and processes, becomes very important. So the questions, when we start asking questions, it is not the individual upon which we should focus. The individual dancer, the individual filmmaker, the individual teacher is not the focus, or individual school is not the focus. You will hear, many of us here are of education, that school education these days, where students are too much loaded with books and copies, too much of workload is too much, class load is too much, creativity is less, more you have to mug up and write, you have a structure given, you have to follow that structure, you cannot write of your own. These things are commonly discussed when we talk of, say, school education these days. Now the issue is, if you ask a guardian, he or she would always say that my child's school is very difficult. I have heard the other schools are relatively better, but my child's school is very difficult. You will not find a guardian who would say that my child's school is exception, rest are all bad. You will hear that. I can give you a completely different example with similar reaction to which you will agree. Fear of crime. Amar padata bhalo. আমি যে পাড়াটায় থাকি সেটাই হয় না, কিন্তু ওই পাশের রাস্তাটাতে ঢুকলেই ড্রাগ বিক্রি করে, তার বাঁদিকের রাস্তাটা দিয়ে গেলে সন্ধ্যেবেলায় টিটকিরি দেয়, নাহলে ওখানে তো গ্রিল থেকে জামা কাপড় খুলে নিয়ে চলে যায়। So all these civilian, আমাদের পাড়াটা ভালো, fear of crime. We normally think that immediate is safe, but rest of the area is very unsafe. Nearby is unsafe. Just like the way school is. See, I am talking of school on the one hand, child's pressure on the one hand, and I am talking of fear of crime on the other. If you mark, the reactions are similar. This is where the problem lies, because we are landing the questions on a specific area or an individual case. We are not trying to think in terms of where are the interconnections. Because in society, nothing comes in isolation. Like say for example his content analysis, content writing, development of content of books, etc. Who would imagine when I was in school or a few 20 years back, these things were not there at all. Just imagine he is not directly in the teaching or a student, but he is on the other side of the table. He is a provider of textbooks. And the company is concerned to develop books which would fit in with the requirement of the society. And for that reason, the company is sending him or people like him to various courses so that they are equipped and can give meaningful input in designing books and their contents. Like I'll give you I do not see any student of science here. There is a person you must have heard, he was a Nobel laureate, American, Richard P. Feynman. You must be joking, he is a Nobel laureate. He is a mind-blowing personality, he is a very favorite personality. Please read his book, Richard P. Feynman. You must be joking, Mr. Feynman. Book's name. Just good read. There you have a chapter where he is speaking that he was a very famous man, and he was actually intellectually extremely active and provocative. So he was placed in a board of a school which was deciding upon the list of books that are to be selected and given to the students for the academic. And there he goes and sees that there is a huge pile of books landed in the school, and those are to be selected. Now, since he being himself, as I said, he is a physicist, he is a very well-known physicist, he was a Nobel laureate, he was a member of the Manhattan Project, Atom Bomb Banana Project member, he was a very well-known physicist. So being like that, he was a voracious reader. So what he did, he read all the books that were there in the school. And the rest of the members of the expert committee did not read. They knew one or two, not all the books. Now when there was a meeting, it's very well-written document, you can read that book. I would strongly suggest to read that book, because it will give you an idea as to how to think, how to place your problems in right perspective. So there he is discussing as to what problem the book's content has and why they are suitable or not suitable, what issues that one must confront with while dealing with school learning, school books, the content of the books. You will surely remember, there is also a very small piece, I don't remember the name of the book as of now, when Rabindranath Tagore talks about his writing. makes a commentary about his writing, that where he went wrong, why his books are not interesting, why some other writers' books are interesting. I don't remember that, I had read it long back. There also he is making such a question. Now, my point is, when I'm asking you, I'm dealing with a problem, I am not going to land my problem or my issue of concern upon the individual or the actors of the individual or the actors of the issue, or those who are only involved there. Now, the second question, fortunately, I have placed from education, where we normally discuss about how children are motivated these days to study. And the common complaint is that students don't want to learn, students go through the motions, they are not interested in reading or interested about what is being taught. That means these questions assume that students today are opposed to learning and often result in negative, denigrating statements about the students. The moment you assume that today's students are qualitatively bad, they are not interested about studies, they are interested about some gadget, at that point only you have negated your research, because you have placed your question where negatively biased candidates are standing, that is the students. So however much you may do research, your result of your research would come negative about the students. So more relevant way is, why should students want to learn? Why? Why the student should try to learn or want to learn? What aspects of the educational process encourage them to be engaged? Why should they get engaged? Why should they be excited? Why should they be motivated? Why should they feel that we should be learners? These are very important questions that you can think of. That when you are writing a book, when you are placing a content, please ask these questions. Why should the student want to learn this? Because when I have a son who is in class 9 now, and my wife also is a professor of economics in a university, we supposedly thought ourselves to be socially conscious, unbiased, and would like to see our child not to be gender biased. But what we observed, that as he started growing up, and from the time he started going to the school, the gender biases were very subtle way coming inside him. About the major source, because the class teacher would always like to speak to the mom, assuming the mom would be teaching the son, not the father. One. Second, the examples of the books, the pictures of the books in this classes, those are gender biased still. And I am not talking of state schools or central school or national school. I am talking of the courses of all the schools. I have checked it out. So the issue is what content we are making and what we are expecting the outcome to be. We want our children not to be having those biases. কুসংস্কার যেন না থাকে, কিন্তু কুসংস্কার থাকার মতন সবকিছু জিনিস আমি রসদ আমার বই খাতার মধ্যে দিয়ে রাখবো। এদিকে বলবো কেন হবে, ও তো শিক্ষিত ছেলে, শিক্ষিত বাড়ি, বাবা মা শিক্ষিত, কেন ওর থাকবে এগুলো? না থেকে উপায় নেই। তার কারণ হচ্ছে the child is not growing up in isolation. The person does not grow up in isolation. So the issues that you are dealing with, all of you I am talking of, very important for you to ask yourself is that how I am going to measure, because they are all interlinked and I have to find out the linkages. So we might also wonder how they have been socialized to not to learn, to reject the natural inclination for curiosity and explanation. Instead of assuming there is something innately wrong with today's generation, today's children, the question attempt to pinpoint the educational structure. Unless we talk in terms of the structure, unless we think of the process of operation, we will not understand why the inquisitiveness is going. We will not understand why the learning is not engaged, learning is quantitative. This much of work, this much of assignment, this much of marks, this much of prizes, this much of awards. So you have numerous Olympiads in the schools these days, and you have multiple Olympiads by various organizations. That's a business for those who are running the Olympiads. But for the children, it's quantity. How many awards, how many exams, how many questions, it's quantity. So it's not engaged learning. This is where we fail to grasp our issue. Let's say, for example, I have taken an example from higher education as to the cost of education, cost of higher education. And we used to think that people do go to college, and in today's society, of course, if you can pay, you can study anywhere. And there are multiple ways of studying. You can have a distance learning, you can have regular learning. So, options are there. Number of institutions have increased. But please remember, the population has also increased. We are roughly 140 crores now. So, still, therefore, we do not find all can afford higher education. And higher education does not mean that just by getting admitted you can do it. Because higher education entails a lot of things that are cost-ridden, that has its own cost. So, how much expenditure has increased on education? That's an important question with regard to population and prices. You will always see that the budget for education goes down. In terms of money, it seems stupendous, this many crore. But when you put it in perspective, into two perspectives. One is prices, market prices, and second is population. What kind of population are you going to cater to? It is then you realize that whatever little drops of budget that comes towards higher education is insignificant. Unless you do that. And what you are doing, you are talking in terms of the people who are going or not going for higher education. How would you understand the process? If you do not contextualize, only when you contextualize, then you can ask the question right. Now, the next segment that I am talking about is finding a research question. In science, in social science, it is always very hard to understand what you are actually proposing or writing and what is research and what is fact. Statement of fact. It is not raining outside. Right? It's a statement of fact. Or the swans, those are walking, or the ducks, those are walking around, are all white. It can be proved wrong if some other colored duck comes. Right? When it rains, the moment it starts raining, the fact changes. But in research, if something like this happens, that's a catastrophe. By mere change of one variable, if the fact changes, the fact becomes reversed. It is not raining now. That's the truth. That's a fact. The moment it will start raining, that fact goes. It is raining. So the fact is changing. But the moment you are talking of research, you therefore cannot make statement where it is so simple as a fact. While you are asking research question, while you are actually putting question, you are trying to examine the meaning, trying to see the pattern. You are not making an individual statement or individual fact of operation. So it's a pattern of a phenomena, how the phenomena operates, how it works. Involving all the aspects of a particular thing becomes very important. So ask a question, finding a research question heading it, just see I have numbered it. Ask a question concerning differences between individuals, groups, roles, relationships, societies and time periods. Please remember, no comparison, no information. If you do not compare, if you do not see the pattern, you will not find any answer. Ask a question that cannot be simply said yes or no. A research question cannot be answered in a simple yes or no. A proper question should suggest a debate. It should always suggest that it is open to debate. It can be still problematized. A question that can be answered definitively, once and then for all, it is not likely to be interesting. Why it will not be interesting? Because you have decided it, final, full and final, this is the answer. If something is given, understood, H2O is water, is there anything to debate about it? Is the form of water, how we can preserve water, how we can harvest water, that is our concern today. Not the water itself, not H2O anymore. Because it is decisively there, water, H2O, pure water. So, ask a question that has more than one possible answer. The task is to make a case for your own position. You can only do this effectively if other possible positions are real, viable alternatives. Avoid making your argument by setting up a straw man opponent. Straw man means a straw man is a form of argument and an informal fallacy based on giving the impression of refuting an opponent's argument, while actually refuting an argument that was not presented by that opponent. One who engages in this fallacy is said to be attacking a straw man. So imaginary situations are something that you cannot bring really to the field. Your assumption, those assumptions based on reality, based on concrete findings of your field, can only give you a proper direction to the question. If you assume that, okay, this is there in the field, I have to go and check, and then you say that I have refuted this, because in the first place it was an assumption that was not proved. An assumption that is not proved yet claimed to be refuted becomes a problem. Now suppose I am saying that in Shantiniketan the water is very hard. Okay. Now this is an assumption I am making which can be quantified and which can be easily measured. Right? Now I am talking of Shantiniketan, suppose most of the people in Shantiniketan are illiterate. Again, I am making an assumption and I can measure. If I go by the population, I can measure, and the measure may tell me that how far my assumption is from the truth. However, if I make an assumption that these days in Shantiniketan, it is only the fancy trees that are planted, therefore the environment of Shantiniketan has gone down, and then I go and do a survey and find that actually it is not happening, and then I am refuting that the claim that Shantiniketan's environment has gone down is untrue. And nobody claimed in the first place. Your assumption, you started with an assumption that okay, there is a drop in plantation of trees which are mostly good for environment, right? So that was an assumption and you checked. But you are drawing a conclusion assuming that you are refuting someone's argument, but there was no argument at all in terms of the quality of environment of Shantiniketan. So you have to have that logical connection when you are making your questions ready. Make sure there is data to your question. Do not ask questions about which you cannot draw data. As I had asked you in the first of the class, that how do you measure? The basic another issue is that you do not do a work about which you cannot draw data. You cannot draw data. Suppose you are making an assumption that all the defense personnel of India have a very high hemoglobin, right? Would you be able to draw that data? That's the biggest problem. You can do a sampling, but for that you need a lot of permissions. You cannot do in private. So getting info, suppose you are trying to do a research of say impact of, just the way he was talking of movies, you can always talk of the impact of something, say what happened in, what was that place in Kashmir where so many soldiers were killed? Pulwama. And or say Balakot. Now these are highly sensitive issues. So if you start asking questions and try to do research on these, you will have problem because you will not get the data, information. Or say even Kargil war, you will not have data which will give you a authentic research situation. You can have a lot of unconfirmed. Suppose people who were involved would say, do not take my name, but this is what happened. You cannot quote me, but this is what happened. I am showing you this document, but I cannot give it to you. Such issues become, they are very interesting things, but they become journalistic. They are no more your research because you are unable to substantiate. So data becomes a very important. Don't say that I am so great a researcher that I do not need data is something a misnomer. Please do not think on those lines. Please always plan your work when you are sure that you are going to get a data. Get data. Otherwise, you will be not in a situation to do your work. Make sure your question is answerable in space allowed. Do not, what you are writing, what you are doing, depending on that. It can be a project, it can be a PhD degree, it can be an MPhil, it can be a postdoc, it can be a paper of a book. What you are writing, what you are planning to do. you must tailor your question, because a research scholar, when he or she starts his research, her research, the first thing that happens, the person falls in love with the subject he or she intends to work on. And the moment there is an emotional attachment with the subject concerned, what happens, he or she wants to ask all the questions about it, find out everything about it. And that is actually not possible. You have to tailor it, you have to bring it down, fit it down to your intended purpose. Because there are others who can do research, seeing your study. There are others who, other time when you can do this part of the research. You may spend your whole lifetime. See, you have seen Amartya Sen. He spent his lifetime on welfare. So there is nothing wrong in it that you are dealing with one subject all your life and looking at it at different angle, different point, different question, different issues. You can do that. But the point is, if you try to do it at one go, you will never be able to complete. So your questions should be specific. Now, how do you make your argument about your questions? That these are the questions which are relevant. Making a research argument involves selecting and prioritizing key factors. As I said, you do not ask all questions. Similarly, your arguments about your research, that I want to do this research, you should prioritize the key factors from multiple possible factors, as I was saying in the last section. A research proposal, when you are writing, you argue that everything under the sun is your problem, but these are the most important issues, specific issues, strong issues that you are focusing on, and these are the non-specific ones that you are normally, they have a weak linkage. So given a phenomena you are trying to explain, it is not your task to be exhaustive. It is your task to convince as to what is the central key area. What is the basic, fundamental, foundational issue involved, not all the aspects. However, if your claim is too strong for you to defend with evidence, you are better off backing off. You will do better backing off to a thesis that can be defended. So, not only the key factors, but also remember what available evidence is there, and through evidence you can defend your work. Use facts, figures, statistics, interviews, data, qualitative, quantitative, whatever, in support of your points. You do not just place data from various sources. You logically connect the data to defend your argument. Depending on your question, you may want to introduce or refute counter arguments. So, by studying data, you may have thought that the claim that is being made about a particular community, say, or a particular place, or a particular issue, does not hold good. There can be an alternative. There can be an alternative argument. If such is the case, you need to introduce and refute the counter arguments. What are the counter arguments? What are the arguments that are prevalent, and what are you saying? So, when you are working out your argument, the presentation of your argument in your research should be very precise. So, you do not deal with the exact how you came to your argument. You begin where you ended your thought. Clean, concise statement of your argument. You do not have to, I first thought this, then I saw this, then I read this, then I found this. Do not try it like that. You have a very precise, concise statement of your argument. In this way, you will be able to make your argument fit in as a defense. How you make your argument? What are the strategies? Establish a relationship between two or more variables. Whether the research you are using is quantitative or qualitative or mixture of both, if your question is about establishing a relationship, then your argument will generally involve adjudicating contradictory findings. You will find research that both supports and contradicts any work that you are doing, any area that you are dealing with. You will find multiple voices, multiple findings, various types of. You first decide, depending upon your evidence, that evidence that you have reviewed, where you come down on the issue, what is your location in the issue. Suppose he is talking of mentally challenged children. So what is his stand in terms of his review and his understanding? What logic he is putting? Because there are findings, because his area of work is interspersed by psychologists, by sociologists, by social workers, by educationists. There are multiple people involved. And they have their different methods and they come from different sides. Issue is where is he, what is his argument, what is his logic, and where is he standing. Depending on that, you have to eliminate the alternatives, which alternatives do not fit, and make a convincing argument with your own evidence. So you have to establish a mechanism. The task here is to provide a plausible explanation of the event. Why it is happening, the phenomena, what is your plausible, possible answer. The relevant evidence may not be complete. Argument should establish a connection between the variables, as well as it should give you, you should be able to show the mechanism with which the variables are getting connected. These are important things when you are planning or when you are writing your research question and trying to do your work. Use the meanings that are unstudied or understudied. You need to make new argument about groups you are dealing with. Take common experience and place it in the research frame. Say, parenting practice as passing along with parental class advantage. Causation, consider the impact of X on Y group of people. Impact of, say, incarceration of parents on their children. Say, children, it can be like examining the parenting practice as passing on the parental class advantage. Parentরা কোন ক্লাসের এবং সেটার impact on the children, or parentদের কোনো event in life, say getting jailed. What impact does it have on their children? So it can be, you can always talk in terms of causation. You have to classify, you can put all things together, either you classify or you lump it together and assess the literature that is there. Why do you think there is further scope of research? That is a very important point that you need to make, that this is the reason why I think this is the gap that exists, and this is the reason why I think we need further research. We need to go ahead with further research. This is the whole setting with which one should proceed in framing one's or setting one's tone of research. It can be quantitative, it can be qualitative. This is a general thing that I would like my students to think in terms of. That's why I shared it with you in this course, because I always consider that at this initial stage, if a researcher confronts these issues, half the problem goes. In the planning stage, if one takes into consideration when the shaping up of the theme takes place, the questions takes place, half of the problem in the later stage, because the rest of the part, when you are designing your research, depends on how you have drawn your question. The way you will draw your research question, that is the way you will design your work. And the way you will design your work, you will choose upon the method accordingly. So naturally, the question becomes very important. That's why I put this segment here. So I would conclude here. I would go for the next section of our lecture. Before that, if you have anything to discuss or a question or ask, that would be convenient. Anything, or we can go straight away to case study research. Is this water fresh?
It is.
Nothing as such?
So, one clarification and regarding that example you gave, that is framing of the research question, that is regarding that learning of, why children are not learning properly, or they are very much interested in motion picture rather than books. So regarding that point, you told that research question should be framed in or formulated in this way, that is, why should the children learn?
Yeah. The moment you ask a question that why children should learn means what is being given. You are saying that students are not reading the books. Why should they be interested in those books? What these books are providing you with? How they are getting more knowledgeable by reading those books? How exciting are those books? What important vistas it is opening up? It is then you are not focusing. See, the moment you have changed this question, your focus is on the content of the book, not on the children. You are no more looking at the children. The moment you start looking, बच्चे पढ़ते नहीं हैं, the moment you say that, your focus is on the children. That children have certain deficiencies. That today's children have certain deficiencies, because of which they are not studying. It's actually the process that we should look. That's why I said he has used 3 very important words. I hope he does justice in his research with these 3 words: content, context, and processes. See, content is something that emerges out of the processes. See, it's a circle. Content emerges out of the processes. And then the content is not out of context. It is the context in which the content is decided. Content gets decided out in a context. It is not out of context. So depending on the context, content varies. So the moment that happens, so what is controlling whom? Think of it. It's the context that controls both the process as well as the content. So context is in the middle, which is controlling everything. What is context? Depending on the weather, we decide our dress. That's context. If I am in a, say, metropolitan city, or I am in a suburban city, or I am in a village, my context change and my behavior also change, my dress changes, my eating habit changes. Those, say, if I am, say, living in India, suppose I have gone to Norway, or say I have gone to Holland, my context is changing. I have to think. The biggest problem is, say, Norway or say Holland, in our world standard, they are the happiest countries. India is not one of those happiest countries. So the attitude of the people there, and attitude of us here will vary, will differ, and the approach would also differ. Just like the way you will see, the more scared we are, the more locks we put on the door. Isn't it? The more scared we are. But how many times have you seen the locks have been broken and the burglary has taken place at your home? It always happens in a different way. It is always, the burglary always happens in a different way. Why will the thief or the dacoit take the hardship of breaking the door with so much of pain if the easier ways are there? So it is always the context upon which we decide. We need to think that the context actually decides the total system, total process, total interlinkages. That is why it becomes so important that when we are asking a question, when we are doing a research, we need to locate where the issue is. We always use a word called problem. When we are talking about research, we easily use this word problem. What is your problem? We normally ask our students, what is your problem? What is your problem means what is your issue of research and what research gap you have found for which you want to do your research. Right? So that's why we call it a problem. But the moment you identify something, any social issue, it can be dowry, it can be anything, any type of, the moment you say it's a problem, you are making it biased. Unemployment, problem. But unemployment is not a problem. Those who are unemployed, they are not a problem. Unemployment is an issue, social issue that needs to be tackled. The moment you say it's a problem, then it's a gone case. So please do not use the word problem when you are talking about a social issue.
Sir, Ramanuj koite tale keno bole je social problems in India te unemployment.
No, that is the common problem that we have.
Okay, fine.
That is a common, that's why I am speaking about this. I am trying to sensitize you all. So please do not use the word problem unless you are dealing with a research problem. You are doing a research, you have a research problem, but otherwise you do not have a problem. Those are all issues. The moment you say it's a problem, you are actually labeling it or making it difficult, making it wrong. Why create this bias? So the word problem itself is problematic. Please remember that.
It's just like poverty.
Poverty is not a problem.
The issues also.
It's a social issue.
Social issues.
Why? Because you will see the policy makers will talk to you like that you are say a goat or a cow who is, say, standing in this place, you have to bring it on the other side. So you become a better cow or a better goat, a better sheep.
How can we define a problem?
See, problem is when it is a problem, when you are addressing a gap in your research, when you are locating, there is a gap. A pothole is not a social issue, that's a problem. But unemployment or poverty is not a pothole. It cannot be covered and the problem would go, isn't it? Had it been so, the problems would have vanished, isn't it? Since they are issues and they are not actually isolated problems, therefore they take so much of, they cause so much of hardship. And therefore we see that when we address these issues, we cannot completely wipe out. It is always relative. It is always relative. Very funny example you can take, many of you must be competent with data. You go by numbers, right? Do not go by percentage. Go by numbers. Number of poor in Shantiniketan, 1981 and 2011. You will see the number of poor have increased a lot in Shantiniketan. In India also the same will happen. You go by numbers, don't go by percentage. You can always create such problems because data is relative how you present. Quantitatively, data is relative how you present, depending on what you present. Because always you remember, data is something, in the way it is presented statistically, there is a high probability that what is critical becomes very sublime. What is crucial is hidden. What is most significant is not there. Just the reverse is there. Those which are, because there are multiple involvement, engagement, linkages. So if you quantify everything, there are numerous aspects that may not be crucial, significant at all. That is an issue that one must remember.
So in case of urban flooding,
yes.
sir,
May I get introduced to you? What's your name?
I'm Dr. Aksharpal from Chandranagar College.
So you are doing this methodology workshop for?
You switch over from quantitative to qualitative.
Okay. You have done your work on quantitative.
I've done all your work in quantitative.
You are
general geography.
You are from the geography.
Yeah, so I'm doing the work in mapping flow and other software is map making softwares. So I'm trying to do some quality research work. That's why I come to workshop how we can do qualitative work. So
you have an area of social geography.
We have an area, but sometimes we are doing research. Sometimes we are doing research. Every data has been quantified. Qualitative data has been quantified in a number or statistical abstract. Then we are testing the number and come to the conclusions. Then there is dilemma between why you are taking the quantity or qualitative. Can we do the research only qualitative, not quantitative method? That's why I am purposely workshop. How can we make it only a qualitative research, not any quantitative data, not as any statistical test or ANOVA or anything. Then my topics, my strategy is urban flooding, urban morphology. So I am doing a work in urban flooding in 4 metropolitan cities.
Urban flooding
in 4 metropolitan cities.
Okay.
Calcutta, Delhi, Chennai, and then in case if you said that urban flooding is a issues, then there more factors are there which are causing the urban flooding. So in my perception view, the urban flooding can be considered as a problem, and the other factors which are related to urban flooding, it can be issues.
See, urban flooding is a problem,
and the factors which
seasonal problem. Okay, it can be taken as a seasonal problem, and you are looking at the issues that are source of this problem, creating this problem. That is what I am saying. That a problem is something which can
Can be solved.
no, not only solved, it can be solved in a particular place in a concerted effort. An issue has multiple linkages. Now, can you tell me what is the reason for poverty? Numerous reasons. And if I have to resolve the problem of issue of poverty, I have to take numerous things. Right? So that is where the difference is. Say gender. If I say it's a problem, yes, it's a problem. Violence, it's a problem. Yes, it's a problem. But it's not a problem in the sense of the word term problem. Here is the crucial difference that one must have, that sensitivity one must have, that yes, it's a problem for a particular person. Say, violence is a problem who are encountering it. But violence generally has an impact over the whole society. So, this is where one must overcome that individualness and go to that generalness to locate where the problem becomes an issue. It affects multiple people and it operates on multiple layers. It's not a single layer. As I said, a pothole is a problem. You can remove it. A toothache is a problem. You are having a toothache. It's a problem for you. It's not an issue for you. It's a problem for you. But when it becomes an issue, when it takes an epidemic rate, or instead of maybe curing or giving better care, before we used to have dental plucking, you have a decay, your tooth is plucked, the pain is gone. But for today's concept, you have root canals. Now root canal has again multiple usages, advantages. It has also a lot of business opportunities, and it has also a lot of danger of cancer. Okay? So there is a threat, there is an opportunity, there is a convenience. Now tell me, it's a problem or an issue? Toothache is a problem, individual problem. A root canal is a problem or an issue to discuss, to debate. Is it open for research? Can we do a research on that? Because at the same time, root canal is a convenience, it's a business opportunity, and it has the danger of promoting cancer, mouth cancer. Now tell me, how will you deal with it? A researcher needs to always prove all this. Unless you prove all this, you will not be doing justice to it. Okay, I'll take a 2-minute break. I'll have a cup of tea and come.
একটা অপারেশন আছে